Yeah. What was more surprising to me as an Asian American was the response it elicited from the audience members. Now, which you have heard previously, a lot of them laughed and applauded, and it really was a proof to me that this type of stereotype that Asian Americans are all hardworking and smart is being normalized, and it's something that people have learned to laugh about without really thinking about the consequences of what these stereotypes may mean for Asian Americans and towards Jewish Americans.
Let's talk about the consequences, because I've had these conversations with my friends and they're trying to understand, well, it wasn't really an insult, was it? I mean, Asians are good at math. That sounds like a compliment, but of course I had to let them know, no, it's not exactly a compliment. It's perpetuating a stereotype. And you talk about these consequences regarding the quote-unquote model minority myth, which you say has been used as a tool to be racist against other groups. Please explain.
Yeah. So first of all, the stereotype of Asian Americans is very generalizing. And I think when you generalize any particular group of people, you're going to run into a couple problems. A lot of people forget that the Asian American community is very diverse, and people often think of Japanese, Northeast Asians as being pertaining to the stereotype, but they often forget that Southeast Asians often aren't treated to the same stereotype. And in fact, Southeast Asians often very much struggle academically. And when stereotypes like this paint a broad stroke over the Asian American community, it really delegitimizes a lot of the discrimination and struggles that Asian Americans in America face today still. Just as people say that anti-Semitism doesn't exist, people also say that anti-Asian racism doesn't exist. And that's why this stereotype is really problematic.
You also write in your piece, though, that this model minority myth also is used against African-American minorities.
Yes. What's really interesting about this stereotype coming up now is that previously, the model minority stereotype was used in the 60s when racial tensions were at an all-time high, and Japanese and Chinese immigrants were used as examples of model minority. And people use these stereotypes, talking to Black Americans, asking them, hey, we have these minorities who worked hard and were educated and rose above, discrimination or, whatever, and have become a model for you guys. And in a way, using that stereotype very delegitimizes the Black American experience and the racism and racial discrimination that Black Americans face today. And the perception of Asians as being smart, as Jewish Americans as being smart and successful, often is used to support systems of white supremacy and racist views of Black Americans.
Yeah, very, very interesting point there. And as Chris Rock predicted, reaction on this Asian joke was quite fierce. And I want to go through some of these tweets and get your reaction. Blake Houndshell said, so we're all upset about the racial makeup of the Oscars, but it's okay to make fun of Asian kids on stage. Another tweeter at Mildly Amused tweets, so that's 2 jokes at the expense of Asian actors. Don't throw one minority down to raise up another, writers. And another one from at Mina Kimes, and she writes, the joke about the Asian kids would have stung less if there were more Asians on stage tonight. Anthony, she raises a good point because, Asians are nearly invisible in Hollywood. I found this statistic very eye-opening. USC's Annenberg School for Journalism says 78.2% of lead roles in Hollywood go to whites, 14.3% go to blacks, 3.4% go to others, 2.7% to Latinos, 1.3% of lead roles in Hollywood go to Asians. How can we change that?
Well, what I believe is part of the reason why Asian Americans are not so represented in the media today is in part to the stereotype that Asians are only good at math or business or those kind of fields of, expertise. And there's a really great program or campaign on YouTube where a lot of Asian American actors and news anchors are speaking up about how they couldn't see themselves in the media because they saw no one else occupying the roles of actors, directors, and news anchors. And when Asian Americans are told that they're only good at math, it's going to be inevitable that they're going to veer towards those, those kind of jobs of expertise. And I think that leads to a lot of Asian Americans, tending to shy away from the arts, which is not really what we want. And we want more diversity, more representation in the media to show, Asian American children, to tell them, hey, you're a creative person. You can pursue these fields even if you wanted to. Look at Margaret Cho, Bobby Lee, Lucy Liu, those kind of figures are so important. Mindy Kaling, Masters of None, is a really powerful example of how Asian Americans can pursue these fields.
And when you don't have representation, it becomes like a self-perpetuating fate for the Asian Americans. And you raise a good point. I myself, as a Korean American anchor, I was able to see Asian American anchors on television growing up in Los Angeles, and that led me to believe, hey, I can do that as well. So that's very important to see people who look like yourself to obviously inspire you that you can go beyond those stereotypes. Anthony Bertreau, it's really great getting a millennial voice on this. Thank you so much. You're clearly a bright student at San Diego State University. All the best to you. Thanks for that.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.